Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many old friends here. And you're going to have a real treat because this book, I'm trying not to praise it as highly as I should, just because I don't want to embarrass Blaise, but this book combines so many different disciplines, evolutionary biology, computing, but philosophy, and in what I think is a really brilliant and writerly way that doesn't drag or whatever. So it's a wonderful read. Please do buy some out there. But it is, the thesis of the book is nuanced and complex. So I've asked Blaise to do a few minutes of, you tell everybody what your book's about, and then we'll talk about it, okay?
Thank you, John. And I couldn't ask for a kinder endorsement. I don't make any of the money from the books that get sold, so this is all about supporting MIT Press. So, it is also free online at Antikythera. No, and in fairness, MIT Press was very kind to agree to this kind of open access approach, and we designed the online version to be very rich. It's not just a PDF, so it's both. But if you're like me, you like to read physical books as well. I should say also that I cheated. I didn't really write 2 books in 1 year. What is Life is actually chapter 1 of What is Intelligence, which is might sound like a funny choice to make sort of like the Hobbit be What is Life and the Lord of the Rings be What is Intelligence, but that's kind of the idea. And the reason is that over the last few years, as my team and I have been thinking and working on AI technology, part of my own background is in computational neuroscience, and the premise of computational neuroscience is that brains not only can be studied using computational methods, but also are themselves computational. And it became clear in some of our research that it's not just neurons, it's not just brains that are computational, but that life is actually computational from the beginning. And I know that sounds like a bit of a weird thesis. We think of ourselves as being wet and squishy, and that's the opposite of computers that are crunchy and electric. But the idea that life is computational goes back a long way to one of the founders of computer science, to John von Neumann, who was also part of the Manhattan Project, and so is connected to the Bulletin in a certain way, although he was a bit hawkish, as far as I understand. Yeah. Although he became a little less hawkish when the Soviets got the H-bomb as well, right? As far as I remember. But anyway, von Neumann was wondering about how life works and how it's possible for life to, as he put it, for a robot to create another robot like itself, which seems a little bit like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. And what he realized is that you have to have an instruction tape inside yourself in order to do that. And that instruction tape has to have the instructions for building a U, and you have to have a universal constructor that will walk along on the tape and follow the instructions to assemble the parts. And you also have to have a tape copier. And if the instructions for building this universal constructor and the tape copier are on the tape, then you have a life form that can self-reproduce, or more generally can heal, can maintain itself, and can grow. And the real insight is that this universal constructor is a Turing machine. It's mathematically exactly identical to a Turing machine. It's a universal computer. So you literally...
Halt for a minute. Explain what you mean by a Turing machine, because not everybody will know.
Turing machine is the formal definition of what it means to compute, invented by Alan Turing in the 1930s. The way he described it is it's a head that can move left or right along a tape, reading, writing, and erasing symbols according to a table of rules. And basically any computation that you can do with a pencil and paper can be done by a Turing machine with the appropriate table of rules. But the interesting thing is that Turing then said, there are certain tables of rules such that if you write the instructions, if you write a new table of rules on the tape, then this first table of rules will follow the instructions on the tape to carry out any other computation. And he called that, or that has been called, a universal Turing machine. And that's a computer. That's what a general purpose computer is. So von Neumann's universal constructor is equivalent to this universal Turing machine, meaning that cells from the very beginning are computational entities. They're following programs. You know, he made these predictions before we had discovered the structure and function of DNA. It is literally that Turing tape, or found the ribosome, which is that universal constructor, or DNA polymerase, which is the tape copying machine. So he predicted all of those from pure theory before they had been found. Anyway, the thesis, you know, so I need to speed up a little bit here. The thesis in the book is that there's something that we haven't appreciated fully also about evolution. We think often about evolution in Darwinian terms as being about random mutation and selection, and competition, survival of the fittest. But there's another component to evolution that wasn't fully appreciated by Darwin and was popularized by Lynn Margulis in the 1960s, which is symbiogenesis. The idea that sometimes living things come together to make more complex living things. And this turns out to be the force that creates more and more complex entities out of simpler ones. It gives evolution an arrow of time toward greater complexity. The moment you begin to realize that those things that are coming together are already computers, are already computational, then this tells you something else too, which is that evolution is a process of growth and intelligence, because essentially you're building computational parallelism as that happens. You're making a more and more parallel computer where there's division of labor among the parts and mutual modeling among those parts. So, you know, intelligence and life and computation actually all have a common origin. The origin of life is also the origin of intelligence, is also the origin of computation. Computation is a natural science, not an engineering discipline. It's the study of that. And AI, artificial intelligence, and here I will respectfully disagree with your characterization. I loved your talk. But I don't think that AI is just a tool any more than I think that we are just tools for each other. You know, I think that when we look at what AI is doing, it's doing something very similar to what we do in our own brains. And more than that, that we have been, if you like, artificializing intelligence in various ways from the beginning of human toolmaking. And, you know, in fact, the intelligence that is embedded in these models is, you know, we only started to get AI that worked when we began to literally train it on everything that we had done. You know, human intelligence is already collective. It's already a symbiotic property of entire societies of people. And the intelligence that is in those models is exactly that human intelligence. It's already a collective phenomenon. It's already a part of us in that sense. So, so anyway, this symbiotic view and you know, this is, if you like, the mirror of the Darwinian and competitive view. It's the cooperative side of that. It doesn't mean that I'm Pollyanna about all these things. There are aggressive symbioses. There are collapses. There are ecological crises. The Earth has endured many of those. So it's not that I lack anxieties, right, about all the things that could go wrong. But I also think that a lot of the narrative about AI existential risk is both rooted in wrong assumptions about what intelligence is, in imagining that it's some individual human property when it's not, and rooted in wrong ideas about evolution and competition.
So that part is obviously, I saw people's eyebrows go up a little bit when you said that.
Yeah.
In the book, you are making the point, I think, that prediction is the key aspect of intelligence, and that these models that are coming out now, they're predictors, but that is a reflection of what we are, is what...
Yeah, we're all stochastic parrots.
Yeah, and can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. The idea that brains are there to predict is really old. It goes back to Helmholtz in the 19th century, and there are neuroscientists who have you know, put forward this idea much more recently. I never took that idea seriously, you know, when I was doing computational neuroscience, because it just seemed crazy that, you know, all the things that we do are essentially next token prediction. That didn't make any sense to me. And I think a lot of people, you know, who work on AI felt the same. They felt like surely we would figure out, maybe from neuroscience, what the trick is to intelligence. And only then would we get, you know, general purpose AI. Now, we had been building, in my team at Google, we had been building next word predictors for the keyboard in Android, you know, the thing that predicts the next word on the little strip above the thing. And we always assumed that those models would suck. You know, they would do okay at predicting, you know, that Dumpty comes after Humpty, but, you know, it's never going to get the right answer to a word problem. You know, if you type in, you know, what is the, you know, height, the height of the Empire State Building in pennies is, you know, it's not going to, like, give you the right answer because it's just statistics. But when we scaled those same models up and began to train them on really large amounts of data and really large neural networks, they began to get the answer right. And this is when I began to think, maybe these neuroscientists were right, and it is prediction. And I think coming to terms with that was, in a way, the stimulus for writing this book. How can it be that prediction really is what intelligence is? I have become convinced that that is the case.
And that's a thought that I assume unsettled a few people here in the audience, but let's move on to some of the... Well, I was going to go into risks and how you think about it, but you said something earlier about a project you're involved in that I know this crowd is going to want to hear about. It's called Suncatcher, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell people what Suncatcher is?
Well, one concern about AI that has come up, even tonight, in this meeting, is the energy consumption. It's not yet really on the radar relative to some of our bigger energy consumption, demands. But when you look at the growth, it's very, very dramatic. It's exponential, and exponentials grow very, very quickly. And on the one hand, a couple of years ago, we've been working on making AI much more energy efficient in the lab in paradigms of intelligence, and I believe that it can be made more efficient by a factor of at least 100 or 1,000 by being more neurally native, if you like. Okay. And so I thought, okay, we've got this. We just have to make it much more efficient. But then began to realize that I don't think that there's an end to the demand for AI. I think that it's elastic and it grows, kind of in a Jevons paradox sort of way. The more supply there is, the more the demand will grow, and then a few orders of magnitude starts to look like not enough. So we began to think a lot about the supply side of energy as well, and the ultimate energy supply in our star system, of course, is the sun. If you put solar panels in space, they can capture about 8 times more sunlight than a solar panel on Earth, because they don't have a day-night cycle if you put them in a dawn-to-dusk orbit, and there's no atmosphere to go through. And so the right way to do AI really is to have a two-dimensional surface that looks like a solar panel on one side and looks like like silicon that does computing on the other side, and that's it. And that's what we're working toward. That's Project Suncatcher. We believe that that kind of architecture will allow so many orders of magnitude of scaling of AI energy that it kind of boggles the mind. I think this is the kind of thing that can move us from what a Russian astrophysicist called Kardashev, one-type civilization, or Kardashev one-half, or whatever we're at right now, to something closer to a Kardashev 2 civilization ultimately.
Okay, and this is like a for real project. You're not. We're working on satellite launches now, and obviously the first satellites are going to look much more conventional, and it's about testing the some of the basics of how one does laser communication among them at very high bandwidth. They'll use conventional TPUs, TensorFlow processing units, but this is a multi-decade project, and one that I hope ultimately will not only dwarf the scale of computation on Earth, but perhaps even dwarf energy consumption on Earth altogether, and in a way that has in the long run, will have no environmental impacts whatsoever on Earth. So it's a sort of a way of separating the costs of intelligence from the Earth's ecology. See, we don't just do book reviews here; we break news. See, it's.
So that was an announcement last week. We were a little low key about it, but I think it's a pretty big deal.
What's interesting now, I'm going to take the U-turn back. Since this is the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, what we do is deal with large-scale risk, and there's been a lot of hubbub about AI as an existential threat, and people signing manifestos and long lists of, really distinguished people saying, superintelligence is going to, kill us all or make us all pets or whatever. And then there are other risks. I just wanted to know, I mean, you've been in this business for a long time. How do you look at risk, and also how does Google look at risk?
Well, Google looks at risk from the point of view of trying its best to be responsible. It's now a middle-aged company. It's no longer like a young a young hotshot company like it was in the early 2000s, and it's been providing large-scale services that huge numbers of people on the planet use for many, many years now. Mm-hmm. And they get beat up a lot, sometimes with good reason, but they're very cautious. Cautious in ways that, frankly, to me as an engineer and somebody who thinks a lot about the future, have ways that have felt quite frustrating at times. It's frustrating to me that, and it was to many of the researchers who worked on the first language models, that we at Google Research we published the Transformer paper and didn't release it. And everybody knows this kind of stuff, as ChatGPT, but that only happened at another company because Google was too hesitant and cautious to release that technology themselves. Mm. So, they are honestly pretty precautionary as far as companies go. I don't think that means that they can't make mistakes. And I guess speaking now very much in my personal capacity, mm-hmm. When I look at stories like how aviation and the automotive industry have improved dramatically over the decades and become safer and safer, that has come through looking at what can go wrong and responding continually. And that's a strategy that works really well as long as there isn't a rupture, as long as there isn't a mistake so big that it's like a nuclear war. Yeah. I am a lot less. I have a lot of concerns about AI. A lot of things keep me up at night. We've talked about some of them, with respect to the future of politics, of the economy, about what can happen in disinfo, in hacking, in biology. But a lot of the existential risk scenarios that people talk about most, that they get the most headlines. If we build it, everybody dies type stuff. I think rely on assumptions about what AI is that have turned out to be wrong. When Nick Bostrom first wrote his book Superintelligence, in 2013, 2014, we were imagining that it was going to be like some alien spider. It would be like we get it by making an optimization system that would play games really well, and that turned out not to be the way we got AI at all. And when we got it, it wasn't some unfamiliar alien spider. It was it's so human that a lot of the problems stem from it passing the Turing test too well.
But there are, real risks.
Absolutely.
And I guess my bottom line question, without going into each one, is so far in the United States particularly, the government hasn't really responded with any kind of regulation or even guidance sometimes. In the current administration, it's just basically completely hands-off. So what should society be doing to maximize the benefits of AI, but protect against those things that are bad enough that you don't want them to happen and have to respond to? Yeah. You just don't want them to happen.
Some of the things that Jan mentioned, like working on security of digital systems, of chips, I think that's really important. We've become, and this really is not just an AI issue, but AI can exacerbate it. We're very vulnerable to technological disruption. The fact that we can support 8 billion people on the planet is due to an intense symbiosis with a ton of technology. If all of that were to stop, say, because there's an EMP event in the upper atmosphere or something over a large area, that would result in mass casualties because so much of our infrastructure already depends on electronics. Right? An EMP event in 1920 would have done nothing. An EMP event today would result in mass casualties. AI can accelerate a lot of those kinds of risks because essentially we're piling more intelligence onto the system, right? One way of thinking about this is, what are the risks of intelligence? Let's set aside whether it's artificial or natural. If you were to think about what a scary thing it is to have intelligent enough beings on a planet that they can figure out the laws of physics, make arbitrary tools, develop arbitrary code that can run on those things, you would start to tear your hair out and imagine how it would be possible for such a species to ever survive, And in that sense, this is a continuation of something that we've been doing for a while.
I mean, part of your thesis, unless I have stopped the ability to read, is, well, these machines are just extensions of humans, so the kind of bad things you can imagine humans doing.
It's that, yeah.
There's one sort of subset of these risks that I was kind of surprised. I brought up, the incorporation of AI into nuclear command and control, and you sort of said, well, you're less worried about that than about its use in conventional weapons. And I just wondered if you could explain why a little bit.
Yeah, this is a subtle and complex one, but to be clear, I don't favor any automation of choices for nuclear weapons. Bluntly, I think there have been plenty of sci-fi movies and stories about what happens when automated systems and nuclear weapons mix. Dumb ones are to me just as scary or even scarier than smart ones. So any kind of dead man's switch, is bad news, and we know the state of the world with respect to that at the moment.
Sure.
Conventional weapons, I don't know. This is very tricky territory. Like I hate the idea of war. I think that I just read a really good book called The Internationalists about the outlawry of warfare in the 1920s in Paris and how that changed things in ways that we don't fully appreciate, even though the teeth didn't come into that until after World War II. When you prosecute warfare in any form, that means that you're killing people. Anything that removes the difficulties that people have in killing each other is bad news.
Project Nimbus.
And well, you mentioned drones, so let's just quickly, like, the lethal autonomous weapons. We haven't seen any success in managing, regulating. The UN has been stuck for a year or two now, trying to even figure out definitions and things.
Yeah.
So is there a way that you know of to deal with that?
It's really hard. David Gunkel has been talking, so he's a philosopher who has been talking for quite some time about the challenges that robots bring to the distinction between people and things, which is a dichotomy that underpins a lot of law and a lot of ethics. We've had this sort of binary idea that there are people and there are things, and that's it, and end of story. People have moral standing. They have moral patiency, meaning that it means something to destroy them. It doesn't necessarily mean something to destroy a thing. And they also have responsibility, and they can be punished, and they can have consequences for them.
Sure.
Things, not so much. The problem is that when you start to have advanced intelligent societies like ours that, say, organize themselves into larger structures like governments, like companies, like institutions, organizations like this one, you begin to have legal persons that are decoupled from individual biological people. And the story gets even more complicated when you begin to recognize that all kinds of non-human animals and actors matter too, and even more complicated when AI enters the mix and you begin to see all of the different ways that those systems interrelate. So this is a kind of a non-answer. I apologize. I don't know what I would do if I were, even if I removed all of my obligations to Google and everybody else, and I could just write the rules. I have no idea what rules I would write about this particular
Well,
issue.
then I feel like I've succeeded as a journalist. I've gotten you to, okay, we're going to switch lanes here. We're going to talk a little bit about politics, right? And AI certainly can supercharge disinformation, create videos that look as real life. It's already nearly turned a conflict between India and Pakistan into a nuclear war. Again, I keep coming back to, well, what should we do about this, thorny, horrible problem that's really hard to do something about? But what do you think?
Well, disinformation is as old as the news, isn't it? I worry about the mass production of disinformation a lot as well. I also think that the period during which we had something that was uncontestably documentary evidence that couldn't be faked was actually very, very brief. When we look at, I don't know, the way the Soviet Union employed airbrush artists to modify photos and stuff,
Sure.
right? The period during which we had video that was recorded in a realistic way from real life, and that the photoshops of the day, if you like, weren't yet sophisticated enough to edit the pixels in a way that could make them look convincing as something other than what they were, except maybe with $1 million Hollywood budgets. That was actually a very brief window. So I think that there are techniques that we're going to have to mobilize, that are largely social, that have a lot to do with rethinking how we consider authority and information sources and so on. I don't think there's just a technical fix, I guess is what I'm saying. We can do things like try to make secure chips that watermark genuine images so that it's very, very difficult to, for images that are taken from real sensors to be modified without that modification being detectable. But these kinds of technological interventions are always going to be limited. And I think ultimately this is a social problem, at least as much as it is a technological problem.
So you're saying it's like teaching populations to question, not just accept this stuff flowing over the internet.
Yeah.
That kind of.
I think that would be good.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to switch for a minute from politics to economics. There's a lot of speculation about AI. How it's going to put everybody out of work. And what are we going to do about that? And let's start with that. There's another economic question I want to ask, but is that actually true? Or is that something we haven't found out yet, the impact on employment?
I think the verdict is still out. What we see in the studies are two kinds of results. And every week that I feel like a fairly definitive study comes out, the next week one comes out that says the other thing. In one version, it is tasks that are automated and the jobs change slowly, and new kinds of jobs emerge and so on. And in the other version, employment is suppressed, and you do have job replacement. I think that the answer is not going to be uniform across different sorts of jobs or different sectors. I also think that it sort of forces us to confront another paradox. I talked about the person-thing paradox. There's another paradox here that I guess late-stage capitalism has brought to us, which is that all of these innovations add aggregate economic value, or else they wouldn't be pursued.
Sure.
But we haven't actually solved redistribution in such a way that aggregate value, is benefiting everybody. That doesn't solve the problem of purpose that you and I have talked about, but let's set that one to the side for the moment.
Okay.
We can return to it. I'll also maybe mention a essay that one of my heroes, David Graeber, who unfortunately died a couple of years ago, anthropologist, wrote in 2014 called Bullshit Jobs. I don't know how many people in the audience are familiar with this thesis, but what he asserted with some evidence is that when Keynes predicted that by the year 2000 we'd all be working 20-hour weeks or whatever it is because of the benefits of automation, that Keynes was right. But that instead of just chilling out and taking our leisure and spending time doing with our friends and families and lovers and doing the things we enjoy and so on, we have instead invented all kinds of bullshit jobs for the middle class. And that a great many people, if you get a couple of drinks in them, as we probably all have now, me too, sorry, will admit that if they don't show up for work in the morning, nothing's going to happen. And that's soul destroying on the one hand. It's unfair on the other because it's only certain people who get the office jobs. Also, the essential jobs are the ones that are poorly paid. Graeber actually called jobs either bullshit jobs or shit jobs. The shit jobs are the ones that, like kindergarten teacher, ambulance driver, right, plumber, right. That those are the people who, when COVID hit, were like, no, you actually have to go back to work, right? And they've been systematically devalued and underpaid. So I think that there's a reckoning with the shit versus bullshit that AI is going to force us to confront, because it can actually do bullshit at light speed.
And just to touch on it, because we've got a little short on time, but if it has the effect of taking a bunch of jobs, putting people out of work, there's an identity problem that goes with that, a social problem that, to me, it doesn't appear our government is set up to deal with in any way.
I agree. I don't think that our economy or our political systems are well set up for the world that we are going to see in the 21st century. But I will say that one of the things that is so soul deadening about bullshit jobs is that they don't carry with them that sense of purpose. That that a lot of real jobs that are actually relevant and important to other people do carry with them, and that are going to remain important no matter what. When I think about creativity, I was very sensitive also, Colin, to your point about art and AI. I think about somebody who passed away very recently, David Cope, the composer. He was the first composer I know of who used AI for composition. His story was that in the late 70s, he was a classical composer. He had an opera commission and got composer's block, which is a thing, and he taught himself to program, and learned natural language processing and so on, and figured out that it was possible to actually, create a Bach machine that would generate unlimited amounts of Bach. And when he put some of these pieces, on the internet later, the music community was extremely pissed off and didn't believe that it was real. And so then he dropped a zip file with 5,000 Bach-style cantatas on his website, and then everybody shut up. But the thing is, I think that I've listened to more of those than any other human alive, possibly including David Cope. Nobody actually cared. People want, they have a parasocial relationship with Bach, and they care about those cantatas, not the 5,000 that came out of the generator. And more broadly, a lot of these things are relational. They're about the relationships that people have with each other. They're not just a commodity. So I think that we have to rethink our economy in terms that go beyond commoditization and go beyond this kind of scalar value and sense of interchangeability. And that requires both revaluing the jobs that are shit jobs today and refocusing on the ecology of humans with each other.
Okay, I've been given the 5-minute warning, and I'm going to violate that guy over there a little bit, but 2 more questions.
Are they
The one is, it's everywhere. Everybody, including Bill Gates now, is saying there's an AI bubble, right? The returns just aren't there to justify the investment in, you're inside both the theoretical and the practical part of doing AI. What do you think?
Yes and no. I think that there are likely to be fluctuations. In the same way that there were with the internet. There's the internet bubble, right? There was a crash in 2000, again in 2008. But all the dark fiber that was left after the crash, around 2000 was lit up in a few years later because, of course the internet was not just a bubble. It was a fundamental new piece of technology that everything afterward is based on. So I think there may very well be, things that pop in AI because there's a lot of bluster in that industry. At the same time, the fundamentals of that, again, we're talking about intelligence, right? I think that if you don't believe that it's real intelligence, then in some sense, you're asking me not to believe my lying eyes, when I interact with those systems. And I don't think that intelligence is a bubble. I think that that is the essence of what has, made everything around us. So no, in the long run, it absolutely is not a bubble, even though I'm sure the market will, encounter its usual booms and busts.
Okay, a last question. So in this one, your book, toward the end, there's a little, what you call an interlude, that basically, you all have to read this book. It's very provocative all the way through. It's saying things that will make you, my reaction was, I'm not sure I believe that, and I'm not sure I don't believe that. It's the first time I ever heard of that. And there's a lot of that in there. But as you do that, you say a lot of famous thinkers are wrong, and including like Noam Chomsky and a member of our Science and Security Board, Melanie Mitchell, even though she blurbed your book.
She's a good friend.
Yeah. But then you have this chapter, this interlude, where you come back and explain why you weren't really dissing them.
Yeah.
And why'd you write that?
I do kind of diss Noam Chomsky.
Yeah. You don't really make up with him.
No, but by and large, and Melanie is a great example, or Ted Chiang, who is also, a good friend, and whose work I love. We have disagreements about a lot of this kind of stuff, and that's good. We have forgotten how to disagree constructively, and the point that I try to make in that short interlude is that all of those people are kind of putting their ideas out there, and some with humility, some less so, but we're all trying to get stuff right, and that process of trying to get stuff right and discussing and arguing and that's how we make progress. If there are new ideas that in the book that you're not sure about, I could ask for nothing more, right? As the writer of that book, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And one of the things that that really worries me about the current moment, and that has nothing to do with AI, is the way disagreement and hostility have become so connected in people's minds. Disagreement is not abuse. Conflict is not abuse, right? I think is the name of Audrey Schulman's book about this. Some of those people that I'm disagreeing with, like Melanie or like Ted, are good friends, and we have dinners together and we talk about these things in a spirited way, and then we hug and we wish each other a good night, and that's right. More conversations like that are what we need.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful way to wrap this up. It was, hopeful after talking about doom for a while here. I really appreciate it, Blaise. This was. I could talk to you for another hour, but they'd probably tie me up and cart me off here. But thanks so much. You're a wonderful, wonderful guest.
Thank you. That's really good.